Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Welsh Republic podcast, episode 66 today. And I just want to say to everybody that my main YouTube account got a second community strike, so it's been taken down. So you'll find a lot of my content now on my backup YouTube account. And I'm going to be having my also content on Rumble and Odyssey and also on Float. That's where you can mostly find a lot of my content. So sorry, folks, if you haven't been able to see anything on my main YouTube. It's mostly because of that community strike. And yeah. But anyways, I would like to welcome my guest, Eyes Inside the Classroom. How are you doing today, mate?
I am doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay, mate. Just been, a bit busy with stuff, just my personal life. What about you?
Busy covering the indoctrination in the schools, especially here throughout the United States. So
It is absolutely ridiculous, mate. What's going on with the whole transgender movement, telling kids they can change their genders. And, what really disgusts me inside the classroom, mate, is that they're giving these drugs to kids that damages them. I mean, it's just absolutely. So, anyways, in Eyes Inside the Classroom, tell me about yourself. What was your background, your political journey, and what made you want to start this YouTube account of yours?
um so my background is I used to listen to podcasts and kind of watch the news, but at first when I would hear Republicans or conservatives talking about critical race theory and the queer agenda that's being pushed on kids. I thought at first, they were being a bit um, overzealous or a bit dramatic, I guess, saying, I didn't think it was as big as they were making it. But then I got onto Twitter just for fun. Like, I was actually trolling, this account that was harassing one of the people that I follow, through politics and whatnot. And
Who
so
was
I
that?
was,
Who was that person you were following at the time?
um, so his name is Dan Bongino. He's a podcaster, and
Oh
he's just
yeah, I've heard of him. He's really, really good. Dan is. He does very good
yes.
videos.
And so, I got on Twitter just for fun, primarily, and I had seen some things, and I was like, okay, maybe there's a little more to this. So I started digging into it a bit deeper, and I soon began to realize that you know I think conservatives, in a way, have been underplaying the issues that are in schools. It's a lot worse than I had ever anticipated. I kept going through or down a rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and realizing how horrible the stuff was. And so then I began to start covering it. This was back in like December, late December last year, and um, I started to, I had another account called Teachers Exposed, and that account got taken down by Twitter. And
Oh, that's absolutely ridiculous, especially when you're exposing like childhood abuse.
yep,
Ugh.
it, and so that Twitter account got taken down, and so then I was able to build up another account, which is what I'm using now. Um, but what I find interesting is, the more I find this trash that's being pushed onto kids, um, the more or the bigger it gets. Like there's even more and more. And as a parent myself, I have two young children. Um, I imagine the schools that they would have to go to and the filth that would be pushed onto them, and I can't sit by anymore, and so that's why I started this page. And really, um, I am an advocate for kids and for them being able to have a childhood and not to be robbed of it by state funded strangers. And so that's where I am. That's how I got here.
It is absolutely disturbing what is going on, and I think homeschooling is definitely going to be the future. Going on.
Yeah, homeschooling is definitely a definite alternative. I do feel though that we have to resolve this issue within the education system as a whole, because there are plenty of families who either cannot afford to send their child to a private school or to homeschool, um, for financial reasons or whatever. Um, but even more so, there are also people who aren't aware of the deprivations that are in schools, and so I feel like we have to advocate for those students as well. Like, we need to bring awareness, but we need to advocate for all children. And that's kind of the way I see it, is that we have to definitely do a multi-pronged approach with this, because otherwise we're just going to take care of part of the problem and not actually fix anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is very true. I was looking at your clips earlier, and I really like the file website. It says here, "Courage is a habit," and I've been looking at like some of the videos, and I have been so disturbed at what I've seen about these kids, promoting this garbage to, these teachers promoting garbage to the kids. Out of all the clips, when it comes to the whole transgender movement being taught onto kids and kids being told that they can change their genders at such a young age, what is the most disturbing story that you encountered when doing this researching and this work you do?
I would have to say that the most disturbing one that I have found so far is actually, and it's one that I covered recently. It's not actually on that file, which I have to give a shout out to real quickly, if that's okay, to my
Go ahead.
partners
No, no, go ahead. That's
over
all
at
good.
Courage is a Habit. They're a great resource for parents if they want to be able to have the tools that they need to fight back against this indoctrination, and support their children from being used as pawns in this radicalized ideology. Um, but going back to that, I think the most disturbing story that I found so far, as far as education goes, is there is a gender clinic at a children's hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania, and of Philadelphia, sorry. Um, and they have explained that they give puberty blockers to children as young as 8 years old. I
Eight
uncovered
year,
that.
are you kidding me? Eight
I'm
years
not.
old.
Puberty blockers to 8 years old. And they explain how they do gender affirming surgery for children as young as 16 years old. Um, and so that's very disturbing. And it would be one thing if that was just a hospital and clinic doing this, because that obviously is absolutely disgusting, and should be ended. However, this same clinic, not the hospital, but their gender clinic, has partnered up with, I know of, and can for sure say at least one school district, and I'm working on finding out more on the other ones. But they have partnered up with at least one school district in Pennsylvania to provide, they say, um, gender affirming training services to school staff. So you have this clinic who is providing puberty blockers to children as young as 8 years old, and then are also going to schools and telling teachers that they need to affirm these students, these children. So they're getting access to more patients by working through the schools, and I don't understand why this story hasn't made more news, because it's quite disturbing. But unfortunately, that's, I would have to say, is probably one of the worst ones that I've uncovered so far.
Has any of the parents in that district uh, brought their stories out to you of their kids being, into in like brainwashed by this in the Pennsylvania schools?
I haven't had any parents reach out to me. I I do have a teacher that's not in that school district. She lives in that school district, but her kids don't go. She has her kids homeschooled or to a private online charter school. I'm not exactly sure, but she's a teacher in a district close by, um, and she has given me some things. They're working on some other things that they're going to expose this school district, but this comes down pretty high. Like this is a pretty huge story that needs exposure. Um, that it goes deeper than that hospital and that school. It goes all the way up to the University of Penn or University of Pennsylvania.
That is very, very true. And, it is insane, what's going on with all of this. Something needs to be done. I saw that in another interview I was watching of yours, that where you were interviewed by someone, I saw that liberals of TikTok, who I think is absolutely brilliant too, who exposes a lot of the things, is a huge inspiration to you.
Yep, yep. Libs of TikTok is actually a really she does a really good job. She's been obviously they've been trying to shut her down because of what she's doing, and what I find interesting, because I do obviously a very similar work with mine, being primarily focused on education. But what I find so interesting is these people, they get so upset that we share these videos, like Libs of TikTok shares these videos of whatever person explaining what they're doing, and they get upset and they call us bigots or I can't remember, basically terrorists. And all we are doing is using their words. Like, we're not altering their words, we're using their words. And so, I think that's quite interesting that people like her and they're coming after us because they're afraid that we're showing their own words.
It is very, very good you're doing that. And I also hear that Twitter also harassed one of the relatives of the relatives of libs of TikTok, which was unacceptable. I mean, it's just insane, isn't it?
Yeah, so it wasn't Twitter themselves. It was a reporter for the Washington Post. It's a newspaper here in the U.S. Her name is now my brain leaves me, but Taylor Lorenz, and she harassed Libs of TikTok um, family members when she was trying to expose Libs of TikTok for who she is, like trying to provide her identity, and so she went and harassed her family members, which is, that at that point, Libs of TikTok or Shikaya is a private citizen. There's no reason why they needed to expose her, but it's because she's using their own words, and so they want to harass her.
I know they shouldn't be doing that. And I also heard that, like, because of the abortion ban going on, that a lot of the abortionists are now really recommending, people to spread, puberty blockers to kids. It's just they're really, because they know the narrative's collapsing, and they know in order to get that they have to like switch the narrative. So obviously, puberty blockers. I feel like abortion was a big thing. You had gay marriage, which is being spread, even though I have nothing against gay marriage. But now it's puberty blockers, which seems to be the next thing that the far left are really pushing onto people.
Yep, exactly. And so I actually covered this. This was a video that was sent to me by one of my followers. But I don't know if you're familiar with the organization called Planned Parenthood, but
A very evil organization. I mean,
yep,
they are absolutely terrible. Planned Parenthood are,
and
like
they're
they do.
tax funded. They are funded by by our tax dollars, and they are the organization that put out an ad targeting children.
Do you know how much money they're getting from the taxpayers?
I don't know the amount, but I know they are heavily subsidized by tax dollars.
It is insane, eh? It is really crazy how they're getting all that money, you know, to rip babies apart and stuff, and it's...
Yep. And so you have them, they're trying to get the children or the babies while they're in the womb, and then if they don't get them by the time, or while they're in the womb, they'll sterilize them when they're teenagers. That's insane. That's insane. But they put out the ad advertising this, the puberty blockers, and it's like you have federal dollars at this point advertising puberty blockers to children. Make it make sense. You can't.
It is insane, isn't it?
It's so gross.
With these videos inside the classroom, is it what videos that you post with the black screen? Is that you going in, like actually hijacking those videos in a way and seeing what those teachers are doing, or is that someone else with a black screen?
What do you mean?
So when you posted these videos, like for instance the one about like West Jordan Middle School, was that you in the video or was that another person?
No, so that was me. I found the training online, and I saved the video and then shared it.
Oh, I see. Well, it would have been very cool if could act as like one of those teachers and see what's going on and intercept a meeting. That would be really cool,
I have done that with other videos, with other training videos. I've been in other trainings where I've recorded it while being, in the session, actually, like, or not participating, but like actually there present during the video or during the training.
Would you like to share one instant? Like what was it about? Where was it located in? What school was it?
Oh, well, so it was online. I just attended online. There's an organization called, I believe it's IDRA, and they did a training on gender ideology, basically. And this was quite a while ago. I haven't attended any recently because I've been caught up quite a bit with schooling. But they basically provided a training, and they also talked. Well, no, so this one actually, sorry, it was actually about racism, and they talked about how, like, I kid you not, that seating, like seating options for children, like the seats that they sit on, are inherently racist. Like, I kid you not, this is a point that they made, and it blew my mind. I'll have to find it and I'll have to share it again. I believe that was back on my Teachers Exposed account, but so yeah, I've been in online meetings. I have never been in an in-person meeting because of where I live. They don't typically have them, so I generally will find ones that are online.
Mm-hmm. So when you've like studied this, have you looked into a lot of the devastation effect of like puberty blockers?
I haven't dug super deep, mostly because there really isn't a lot of data put out there about it. We do know, though, that Lupron is a puberty blocker that they will use. And that is the same drug that they use to chemically castrate child predators or child rapists, and pedophiles. So we have them injecting that same chemical into children. So we know what it does to men. Obviously, it's going to have devastating effects on young children, especially when they're 8 years old.
Yeah, I mean, 8 years old. And I also, hear one thing that conservatives say, that a lot of that basically no Democrat are protesting against it. Well, actually, there are some Democrats who are protesting against it. And one organization I really love, who are gay people and, who basically are supportive of LGBTQ rights, is Gays Against Groomers. You actually have drag queen people who are against, the grooming of kids. So it's like, and I think to have an organization like that, and to have here and lives of TikTok, it's such a good thing, because especially in today's world where people are learning about these nonsense, it's like I just don't understand, what's happening to the West, like what's going on, the education system. I mean, it's just, and especially in Australia, because right now in Melbourne, they're actually going to be passing a bill that is going to make it illegal for pretty much, illegal for parents to stop their kids from having transgender surgery, and especially, when not just that, especially, when you have like incidents where these kids are being taught that without the kids' permission, it's just fucking nonsense.
It's absolutely insane. The thing that a lot of people need to realize, and you're right, we do have people. I've worked with people on the other side of the political aisle in covering this. I've had people who are Democrats that have come to me and said, "Hey, you know, I don't agree with what's happening. How can I get involved? We may differ on other things, as far as like policies go, but there are a lot of Democrats who do not support what is happening. And so anytime I have that option to work with somebody that even on the other side of the aisle, I will. And you mentioned Gays Against Groomers. They're a great organization, and it's quite interesting that they are supposed to be part of this protected class, with you know uh, being gay or homosexual or bisexual or whatever. Even trans. There was a Trans Against Groomers Twitter account that, like, shortly after it was created, it was suspended, and so they're trying to silence them because they are people who are supposed to be this protected class, but the protected class now is going against the narrative, and they don't know what to do with them, so they want to silence them. Um, and this whole thing, it goes deeper than sexuality or gender or any of that. It goes far deeper than that. This all has to relate or goes back to cultural Marxism, because you have one class, your norm and your counter norm, and that's how Marxism works. You had the capitalist and the anti-capitalist. It's very, very similar. It's the same basis, and the reason being is that's their goal, is to create a bunch of social justice activists to overthrow the country as we know it, especially as the world as we know it, in the Western world. And because they know they can't do it any other way, they have to do it through social justice activism. Any other attempt, through legislation would get stopped immediately. Like, they know that. And then going back to the Melbourne story that you were saying, that's when they want to ban parents from parenting their children, that says something. That says a lot. That says that they have this hold on children right now, and brainwashing them and changing their viewpoints, which would counter what their parents view. And they know that if they let the parents have any say in it, they would
It's
lose
it's
that
like
grip.
what the Book of the New World Order in 1989 says, that in the New World Order, parents won't be the ones in charge of their kids. It will be the elitists and the government who are in charge of their kids.
That's what they want, because they know they can't come in, especially like in the United States. They know they can't come after your guns. They know that. But if they get their children, they've created this whole new social justice army that they can then overthrow, what, not through guns but through voting, that they can overthrow the free world as we know it.
Yeah,
And it's scary.
which has slowly been, infrastructuring, whether it's been here in New Zealand, in Australia, in America, and in Canada. It's just horrific. Like in Canada, if you think it's bad in the United States, it is horrific in Canada, and even Britain too. You probably saw right now in Britain, someone got arrested for pretty much, criticizing the transgender people. Have you seen that? Like someone getting arrested just for criticizing the transgender movement on there. Like, how was that freedom? And especially
Yep.
all these lefties going about, oh, we respect, people's opinions, and then that gets it.
And they claim to be the party of tolerance, but they're tolerantly intolerant. That they are only tolerant if you follow their narrative. The moment you step outside of that narrative or try to go against that narrative, they're incredibly intolerant. For example, going back to the Gays Against Groomers, you have an account, that protected class per se, going against the narrative, and now they want to shut them down. They shut down their PayPal. They shut down, other accounts that they had. Why? Why? I thought they cared about the homosexuals. I thought that's what this was about. I thought it was about equal rights, equal protection under the law. Why would we try to silence them if it wasn't
Exactly.
to destroy society and the Western world as we know it?
Mm-hmm. And I really respect I really respect like people like Margie Taylor Greene, who really speak out against this nonsense, who say, like, she apparently said that, like, in a long time, she doesn't think that straight people are going to exist in this way, even though, I mean, that is a bit of an exaggeration by her. But it is true, like, they are pushing the transgender movement. And I think she really, does a fantastic job of exposing that, like, not just her, but you've also got, like, Alex Stein, you got Steven Crowder. I remember seeing the video where also Steven Crowder got one of his crew members to go undercover and like pretty much see what's going on in these drag queen shows. And it was like when I was seeing those parents, pretty much like cheering it on when there were kids who were getting indoctrinated, like these kids seeing private parts of stuff, seeing nude people. That shouldn't be happening. That should not be happening in a civilized society. Kids should be pretty much, learning to be kids. And Alex Stein does a fantastic job of exposing that too. And it's just at this point, and especially I watched this really good video of this preacher who came into like a transgender rally that was going on, like not a transgender rally, but a transgender like LGBTQ, like party going on where kids were there and they were pretty much being told that they can do this, they can do that, and you had adults being nude around them and stuff and just being awkward. And this preacher came and said, enough, and you just have the parents booing the preacher, saying boo, boo, boo. And it's like, and it goes into all this conspiracy of like, how chemical poisoning, really has affected the minds of people, and I feel like for us to get this low, for us to get this, done the way we're thinking now is probably from all the chemical poisoning we've had, all the media influence we've had in the last 20 years, of how like Alex Jones talks about the fluoride, how it makes the frogs gay, and like you could argue there is some debuncal to that. But dude, I think it's real, like GMOs and stuff. It has led to all this takeover of it. It's insane, mate. What is your thoughts on that?
So I think that has an effect, and I would have to look more into the like the science behind it. But I do know that there is definitely a social contagion that is pushing a lot of this. Especially you look at the transgender ideology and you look at it at their focus with children, and you look at how young girls primarily are the ones who are wanting to transition. And why would that be? Would it not be that young girls going through puberty start to feel very uncomfortable with who they are, with their body, and how it develops and how it changes through puberty. Would that not be very uncomfortable? Have we not known about that? Like, so you look at it. This has happened in a way that, and it goes back. This isn't just within the last few years. This goes back decades. This issue, and it started, with people like I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Money. It escapes me, but he talks about basically how children think about sex, how children talk, or are sexual and this and that. John Money, I think is his name. I can't remember for sure, but
Yeah, and
anyways,
also the member of Nambla talks about this nonsense. The what Chris Hansen. We remember Chris Hansen when he used to you know what it is, right? Nambla, the man, I think it's Nambla, the Man Boy Love Association. They talk about such creepy things, pretty much like what you're mentioning. They're also ones who talk about, oh, the kids should be with men, and it's just disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
yep. And so you have this ideology that has been in the universities, especially for a really long time, um, and I there's a lot about COVID-19 that I absolutely hate, and not the disease itself, but what it did to our society as a whole, and the amount of powers that we let our leaders have over us. But the one thing I will always be grateful for with COVID-19 is it really, really woke parents up, because this has been going on for a long time. For example, back in 2015 or 16, I can't remember, but there was the Maryland Board of Education, or like the Department of Education was basically advising schools to withhold a child's gender identity from parents. That was back in 2015 or 16. So if it was happening then behind closed doors, how long has it been happening? Like we're just scratching the surface with all of this. This is a deep, deep issue, and again, there may be some chemical um, stuff with it as far as the pollution and whatnot, and the fluoride. I don't know, but I do know as far as the push for this has been happening within the universities for several decades.
Hmm. I also saw a latest video of yours, a really disturbing meeting that happened, in one of these training things that says teachers at Denver South High School explains that to be inclusive, he or she teaches in biological should say it's not a woman who produces eggs, it's ovules that produces eggs. Like what?
Yep. Yeah. So the that teacher, I won't share their gender identity, their actual or their gender sex, their biological sex on here because I don't want you to get another strike. Um, but that individual basically explained, that we need to clean up the language. We need to be more inclusive in our language in biology. Um, Inclusive in biology, biology is science. Last I checked, and science would tell you that a female human being, or any female, as far as that produces eggs, that they produce eggs. The female, the ovaries do. I'm married. I'm a married man. I have a wife. I did not marry ovaries to hope to have children. I married my
What
wife.
is what is an ovary?
So an ovary is one of the parts of the female reproductive system, and it basically is where the eggs are stored, and what they're created. You know, eggs are within the woman are created while they are in the womb. Um, but the ovaries are in their. I mean, the eggs are stored in their ovaries, and then when they ovulate, they let out an egg. And so it's basically just the storage space for a woman's eggs. And you can edit
Mhm.
that if you need to. I don't know, to make it more concise, but
Yeah, well, but doesn't bother me. It's all good. We're fighting for freedom of speech. This thing needs to be spoken, because, well, my YouTube account already getting a community strike. There's nothing I can do. Obviously, that's why I'm going to be moving, pretty much focusing on Rumble. But yeah, so speaking of the whole transgender movement and stuff like that, so you also expose critical race theory too that's being taught to kids that's very destructive. What is the most disturbing case of the critical race theory thing that you've seen? Any case you've encountered with that?
um, in particular, like a certain case, I guess I wouldn't say I have one that like kind of comes right to mind. Um, my biggest issue with critical race theory, and they'll try to say critical race theory isn't being taught. Which the way they do it is they play games with the wording, the actual term critical race theory, because that is a legal course in college, that was originally supposedly created to combat legal injustices within or for African American people. But anyways, but the framework which it is built is that they used to build critical race theory, which is to teach that there are inherent injustices within society, and if you're white, you don't face those injustices. You are actually the one that is inherently pushing those injustices on to other people of other races, whether you know it or not. You have your implicit biases in your or biases, and so anyway. So with that being said, it is being taught. So to provide that background, it is being taught not as a course, obviously, but through the theories that have been taught to educators and how to recognize their own biases and all that. But as far as the thing that I guess again I can't think of anything that comes particularly to mind, like a certain story. But the I think the biggest issue that I have with it is that it is teaching young, especially young African Americans, that they are oppressed. It's teaching young children that they are oppressed because of the color of their skin. Um, when in reality, that is not the case. We live in a very, like the United States as a whole, obviously has some background that was ugly. And I will admit that we did some not very good things. However, also we were not the only ones. But that being aside, we are teaching these young children that they are either oppressed or oppressors, and that's very damaging, because it also teaches these little African American students or Hispanic American students or whatever that they are oppressed, and that's just how society is. We've been fighting for it, but really they're oppressed, and our system is just it's unjust, and that's just the way it is. That is disturbing. I think far deeper than telling a white child that they are oppressed or that they're oppressors because of the color of their skin is to tell a young child of color that they are oppressed because of the color of their skin. You're telling them that they can try all they want, but really at the end of the day, the society and the cards are stacked against them.
Like I remember seeing, I just think if for any society to have to fight against racism is to get a white person to go up on stage and pretty much say to them that, oh, your race is to blame for this and you should learn this. It's not going to fix racism. It's not going to do anything to fix racism. It's just like getting a Muslim student on classroom up in front of a classroom and blaming like this one Muslim kid for all the faults of Islam. It's absolutely outrageous. It's both things. It's just like, blaming a white kid for all the, things of the world. And even if you were to have a black kid go in front of the classroom and then he gets blamed for all the bad things black people did, it's not going to, make racism go away. It's not going to help fight it. It's only going to make it worse, because then, you're going to have that kid who's basically being on stage, being humiliated, is then going to think that, oh, he's the problem, he's this, and it's outrageous.
Yep. And it's sad. It is deeply sad.
Mm-hmm. I just want to also ask you, I saw this really interesting thing about this guy called Casey Miller, and he was talking about, we're going to go back to the child grooming, and he was talking about pretty much when teenage girl, was he a teenage girl?
Who is this?
Casey Miller.
I'm not sure.
This is the one that basically took the hormones for 5 years, what it does to a teenage girl.
Oh, so that was, yeah. So she is a biological female.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she, I believe, started taking testosterone at age 16, based off of the storyline that she offered in the video. And she is now 21 years old and has a receding hairline. And basically, as a individual, like as far as like being able to ever produce children, like she's destroyed. And this is what it's done to her. And now she's speaking out against it. There's another one called Chloe Cole. She is an 18-year-old girl who actually did an event with Marjorie Taylor Greene, a press briefing with Marjorie Taylor Greene about.
Yeah, I've heard of her. I have heard of her.
Yeah, and she's 18 years old. And she, I recommend to any of your followers, follow her. Let me find her.
Maybe I'll try and get her on my show for an interview.
Yeah, she is awesome. Her name is Chloe Cole. Let me find her Twitter account. So her Twitter account is CHOOOCOLE. So Chew Cole. And she actually just started an organization with some other detransitioners called Detrans United. And this is just in her pinned tweet. And she said, "We were inspired by the criminal letter written by the AAP and APA to Attorney General Garland to make our first initiative a letter written on behalf of detransitioner." And so they wrote a letter, I think, to Attorney General Garland, basically calling out what's happening. And so I think, especially somebody her age, 18 years old, I think it takes an immense amount of courage to really,
especially in today's wokeness society where it's just absolutely mental.
Yep.
What is with her, like, what is the full story of her? Like, did she have any bad reactions from like detransiting, or was she basically, did she stop? Like, what is the story behind her?
So she just recently come out. I don't know, or has started to speak out. I don't know the full story behind it. I just know that she began to transition at age 15 or 16. I'm not 100% sure, so don't take me for truth on that part. But I know she was really young, and I believe she had top surgery and had her double mastectomy. And then at 18, and what's really interesting, she actually there is one part where she didn't talk about it in the video with Marjorie Taylor Greene, where she explained that, she felt uncomfortable in her body. She uh, saw on social media that there were, I think Instagram in particular, if I remember right, that the um, she saw this, the transition movement really happening, and she felt like it was something that she could actually be a part of, like where she would feel like she was a part of something. And that right there is what really kills me, is that you have children who want to feel a part. They want to be, as human beings, we want to be a part of something. Like that's just our innate nature. And so she wanted to be a part of something, and so she, socially transitioned, physically transitioned, um, and now at age 18 is having very deep regrets. And she realizes, she's like, I will never have children of my own. She said that, she's like, I'll never have children of my own. And she's received a lot of backlash from people within the trans movement, that because she's speaking out again. It goes back to the fact that, if you, as long as you fit that narrative and you follow along and you don't step outside, you're fine, and they will support you, they'll back you, they'll promote you. But the moment you step out, they try to cancel you. And that's what they're trying to do. They don't like her being able to expose what they're doing, because they're a bunch of cockroaches.
Oh, terrible. Anyways, inside the classroom, eyes inside the classroom. I just want to say, is there anything else you would like to say before we finish up the show?
I would just like to say, whether you're in the United States, outside of the United States, wherever you may find yourself listening to this podcast, please, for the sake of our children and our society as a whole, get involved. Find ways to get involved. There are plenty of people that you can speak to, you can talk with, but at the end of the day, especially if you're in an area where you have elections, get involved. Know who is running. Help support them. Whatever, especially in the United States. Please get out to vote in November, because it's obviously a crucial election. But get involved. Get involved in your local school boards. Get involved in your child's education if you have children in schools. Make sure you know who their teachers are. Make sure you know what their school board policies are as far as gender identity and withholding information from you as a parent. And make sure that you are speaking out against this and making change, because we can talk about it. We can, I as a person who covers this regularly, I can expose it. But at the end of the day, my efforts are in vain if people aren't doing something with what I share. My goal with my account is not to just stir up anger, or to stir up, gain followers and just make myself known, because I could care less about being known. My goal with my page is to bring awareness first, because without awareness there's no reason to act, but bring awareness, and to then cause change. I want change. I don't do this for clout. I don't do this for fame. I do this because I want change. I want to protect children from what is happening. So again, I guess in short, get involved. If you have questions, reach out to me. Depending on where you live, I may be able to help, or at least put you in contact with people who can. But get involved, because talk is cheap. Actions are what matter, and we have to stop this. It has to be stopped.
Thank you for coming on my show. And where can people find you?
So I am primarily on Twitter until the people try to get me off of there, because I did recently this week get taken off of Twitter, or locked out of my account, not taken off, but locked out of my account, because I shared a video that was sent to me by the person who filmed it at a public event. But the reason why they locked me was because they said it was private media, even though the person who filmed it sent it to me. Anyway, so that being said, they're actively trying to get me shut down. So I am on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Truth Social, and I'm trying to think where else. Yeah, those were the main three. And then on my Twitter account, I do have my in my pin tweet ways that they can reach out to me, my email address, as well as for tips and or if you have questions, and then as well my direct message inbox on Twitter is open. I don't always see them, so you may have to send them a few times because, especially if I'm not following you, I don't usually see it. Um, but yeah, so Twitter is primarily the best way to get a hold of me. Next best place would be my email, which is, I'll just say it on here. It's inside the class at protonmail.com. Again, inside the class at protonmail.com. And yeah, so go ahead and reach out to me at either of those two places. Facebook, I kind of post. Truth Social, kind of. I don't get a lot of traction there, so I primarily stick to Twitter.
Thank you for coming on my show, Eyes Inside the Classroom, and everybody, please check out his wonderful content exposing all this craziness that is going on in the schools in America and also critical race theory being exposed to. Thank you for coming on my show. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to say to everybody, take care, enjoy. Thank you for joining the Welsh Republic Podcast, episode 66. Take care, everyone. Bye.